All right, here we go. All right, so intro to trigonometry, okay, you guys. So this is essentially review from a year ago. You should have taught this a year ago. So we have something called sine, cosine, and tangent, and those you guys are basically ratios of the legs and a hypotenuse of a right triangle. Okay, so there's an x value right there. There's a y value right there. And this is called r, you guys, because if you imagine this on a circle, then that is the radius, which is called r. So, right, you guys are used to variables being letters because it kind of represents lengths. But for angle measurements, we label it as this. It kind of looks like, I don't know, an egg or something. That's what you guys call theta, okay? So that is what we use as a variable for angle measurements, okay? Which could be in degrees or radians. So that's called theta. So what I wrote down here, it's pretty much your guys' trig ratios. So sine theta is opposite over hypotenuse, which is the SO and the SOHCAHTOA part. Cosine theta is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse, which is the CA in SOHCAHTOA, and tangent theta is opposite over adjacent, which is the TOA part in SOHCAHTOA. Okay, so whenever you guys do this, at first, always try to be into perspective of theta or the angle measurement, and then that determines if the side length is opposite or if the side length is adjacent or if the side length is the hypotenuse. But definitely get used to this stuff, you guys, because that's going to be crucial when you guys do intro or when you guys learn about your trigonometry. So again, if you guys have questions or stuff, this is kind of like pretend it's like class where you either can voice a question or you guys can just write in the chat in the commentary if you have questions. Okay, so we're gonna move on. So we're gonna look at our first one, which is finding an angle measurement. Okay, so we gotta find what that theta value is. So remember, you gotta be in the perspective of this angle measurement. So in the perspective of that angle measurement, I know that this length right there, that is the opposite. I'm just gonna label everything. This length right here, that's the adjacent side, which means right next to. And this one right here, you guys, that length, 13, it's opposite of it's always opposite of the 90-degree angle. This is the hypotenuse. So remember, it's in the perspective of that theta, that angle measurement, that I can identify opposite side, adjacent side, and hypotenuse. Now, the reason why I label this, you guys, is so that it gives you an indication on which trig identity you have to use. So do you see how there's information at the A and there's information at the H? So which trig identity uses cosine? Well, or sorry, which trig identity uses A and H? Well, it's cosine because that's CAH, right? So I know I have to do cosine theta is equal to, remember, adjacent over the hypotenuse. So adjacent is 12 over the hypotenuse, which is 13. And now you have to solve for theta. So to isolate that theta, you guys, do you realize that we have to get rid of that cosine word? So in order to get rid of that cosine, this is probably something you might remember, you have to do the cosine inverse. That cosine -1, you guys, that's pronounced cosine inverse. So you have to take cosine inverse to both sides. So this cosine inverse will cancel the cosine. So then we got theta is equal to cosine inverse of 12 over 13. 12 over 13. So if you guys have a scientific calculator or a graphing calculator. Um, Probably zoom into my screen so that you guys can see this. So on the calculator, you guys, for some of you, if you have a Texas Instrument Texas TI 84 or TI of something, here's the word cosine, but you want to do cosine inverse. So it's in the background of this cosine letter. So you gotta do second, and then you hit cosine. So once you hit second cosine, do you see how it's cosine inverse now? So cosine inverse, and then you gotta do 12 over 13. So 12 divided by 13, which is that. Press enter, and you guys should see it's like 22.6 degrees. Now, if you're getting another decimal and you're typing this exact thing in, you might be in radians and you have to convert it into degrees. So this, you guys, is going to be 22.6 degrees. When you do trigonometry, you're going to have a calculator, but we'll show you how to do it by hand later, but you're going to have to need a calculator. Before we move on, does anyone have any questions? Either you verbally say it or you write it in the commentary. Or if you're fine in the commentary, just give a thumbs up or something. But does anyone have any questions? It could be about calculator use. It could be about conceptual question. Any questions? All right, in the chat. Okay. I'm not gonna say your name for the sake of the video, but what type of calculator do you have? Do you have a Casio or do you have Texas Instrument and is it scientific or graphing? Okay, so for the TI-84, to change it to degrees, you have to click this word which says mode, and then it's going to give you a pop-up menu, and on mode, it's if you scroll down just a tad bit, you'll see that it says degrees and radians. Degrees and radians. So just hover over degrees, enter, and then you should be in degrees from there. Okay, we're gonna move on. Okay, so right here, is the opposite. This side is adjacent, and this side is the hypotenuse. Now, when you take a look at this, there's information at A, adjacent side, and the H side. So that's going to be cosine again. So cosine theta is equal to adjacent, which is 4, over hypotenuse, which is 5. And then to solve for theta, gotta do cosine inverse to both sides. These cancel. So we get theta is equal to cosine inverse of 4/5, which is roughly cosine inverse of 4 divided by 5, 36.9 degrees. 36.9 degrees, okay? So in order to get rid of, like, if it's at sine theta, you guys, or tan theta, and you're trying to isolate to solve for that theta, to find your angle measurement, you could take sine inverse, tan inverse, or if it's cosine, cosine inverse. Okay, so I will leave that there. I will hover down. Okay, so here are these two examples, you guys. I would like you guys to like try this out for yourself. I'll put it at like 3 minute mark. I'll put it the 3 minute mark on my timer. So you guys try this out for 3 minutes and then I'll go over it. If you have any questions, let me know during this time as well. But 3 minutes, try both of those out. The doyos, try it out for 3 minutes and then I'll go over it, but ask any questions if you have any. It could be about calculator too. Under 1 minute to go, and we'll go over it. All right, that should be enough time. I'm gonna go over this with you guys. All right, so for this one, remember in the perspective of that angle measurement, this side is the opposite, this side is the adjacent, and this side is the hypotenuse. So the trig identity that uses opposite and adjacent is tangent. So you're gonna have tangent theta is equal to opposite over adjacent, and then you guys need to tan inverse to both sides. You're going to take the tan inverse of both sides. This will cancel off the tangent, so we're just left with theta is equal to tan inverse of 4/5. Put this into your calculator, so tan inverse of 4 divided by 5, which is around 38.7 degrees. Okay, so there's that one. Now, for this one to the right, so in the perspective of that angle measurement, opposite, this one's adjacent, and this one's hypotenuse. So the trig identity that uses opposite side and a hypotenuse side is sine. So sine theta is equal to opposite, which is 7, over hypotenuse, which is 16. Now we have to take sine inverse of both sides. Cancels, and then we got theta is equal to sine inverse of 7 over 16. Put that in your calculator, so sine inverse of 7 divided by 16, which you should have gotten 25.9 degrees. Okay, so that's how you guys find your angle measurements using sine, cosine, and tangent. Okay. All right, we're gonna do our last two problems and then we are done for today. Okay, so example 3. Now, this one is slightly different because you have to find a side length now, but the process on how you go about this, it's pretty much the same. So, right, gotta be in the perspective of the angle measurement that they give us. So we gotta be in the perspective of that angle measurement. So this side would be opposite, this side would be adjacent, and this side would be hypotenuse. So the trig identity that uses opposite and adjacent is tangent. So tangent of 50.1 degrees is equal to opposite over adjacent. So x over 5. Now, in order to calculate this, you guys, the x, you have to cross multiply. So we're going to put this over 1, and then we're going to cross multiply. So 1 times x is x. 5 times tangent 50.1 is just 5 tangent 50.1 degrees. So in order to calculate x, rounding it to the nearest tenth, we gotta use your calculator. So on your calculator, now you don't have to do tan inverse, right? That's not tan inverse, that's just tangent. So on your calculator, you could just do 5 tangent of 50.1, just like that. If you guys take a look at my screen, just do 5 tangent 50.1, just basically how it's written. Well, this is a Texas Instrument, by the way, a TI-84. So then you press enter and you should have gotten, well, that 9 rounds up, so then you'll get 6.0. So that x is a length of 6 about. All right. Last one. So remember, in the perspective of that angle measurement, so in the perspective of that 25 degrees, this side is opposite, this side's adjacent, and this side is hypotenuse. Well, which one uses opposite and which one uses hypotenuse? That is sine. So for that question that the person just asked, you don't do tan inverse, you just do tangent. You only do tan inverse when you are solving for angle measurements, okay? Good question. So this one is sine 25 is equal to opposite, which is 5, over hypotenuse, which is x. Now, again, to solve for this, you guys, you gotta cross multiply. So I'm gonna put this over 1, cross multiply. So x times sine 25, you guys, is just x sine 25. So x sine 25. And 1 times 5 is 5. So you guys can kind of choose, like, if you guys want to multiply this way first and then this way, or you can choose to multiply this first and then set it equal to this. It doesn't matter. Either way works. So now remember, you're trying to solve for x, correct? So that means we need to get rid of that. And in order to get rid of sine 25, you guys, you have to divide both sides by sine 25. Okay, so these cancel, right? So all we're left with is x equals 5 over sine 25. So in your calculator, you have to calculate 5 divided by sine 25. So on my screen, you guys, 5 divided by sine of 25, it looks like this. 5 divided by sine of 25. So once I press enter, then it gives me that, which is going to be your answer. So the answer is 11.8. 11.8. So your answer is 11.8. Okay, so I'm going to end that recording, but that's basically your guys' lesson for today.